Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to an all-new weekly art challenge review video. I'm your host, BJZL. If you're new to the channel, number one, thanks for watching, I appreciate it. But number two, I do one of these videos every single Wednesday. At the end of the video, I give you guys a new weekly art challenge word prompt for that week. You draw a design based on that word, you post it online, which stay tuned to the end of the video if you want to take part in these challenges, and I'll tell you exactly how and where to post your work. But then that following Wednesday, I go back through, pick a handful of designs submitted from viewers like you, and then do one of these review videos on it. So last week's word was dinosaur, so let's see what you guys came up with. Alright guys, let's go ahead and jump into this week's video. Last week's prompt was dinosaur, so let's see what you guys came up with. First one is Cory, and Cory's got this rock and roll dinosaur. Just really, really cool. Love the overall design. The character design on this is just fantastic. Line work is really good. It's got a lot of personality to it. Love the little kind of punk rock nods with the earring here and the nose. We've got the mohawk coming around here, the leather vest back here, and the bandana here wrapped around the leg. I think it's really, really good. Love the colors. Love these little circles here too around the entire body. Just kind of gives that scale effect without actually going in there and doing full-on scales. So I think doing that would really detract from the design. So I like these kind of lightweight lines and the opacity turned down on those. Just a little bit of a, you know, not in your face color is a really, really good choice. Also the background here being on stage and having this blur effect, so you've got a really good depth of field there, kind of the stadium feel. And I kind of like too how this curves around at the top here. It doesn't go straight across. It almost has a kind of spherical look to it, and I think that draws the viewer in. And same thing with the lights here, just kind of directing the attention to the dinosaur is super, super cool. One thing there that I would have done a little bit different probably is on the speakers themselves. I'm not a huge fan of going and just doing these perfect straight lines. You've got a very almost kind of graffiti-esque cartoon character here, so I would have made these stand out, give them a little bit more personality. If I can go ahead and, let's see, drop the opacity down of this one, and then we'll do a new layer on top. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. So let's do a new layer here. Just because, like I said, that curve that we've got going behind here too, with the kind of rafters in the background, it kind of has that curve. So doing that same curve down here and just kind of giving these more of a, like I said, just a crazier look here, and just having that nice curve to go along with those, I think would just add a little bit more just personality and a little bit more action to something that looks kind of stagnant and stale, just sitting there, you know, with that perfect lines coming down, just kind of giving those that curve there. Something like that might work out just a little bit better. Obviously, this doesn't detract from the design at all. I think it still works, but I would have liked to seen something like that just because I think it would have given it more personality. And then, of course, you know, you could have had some lines coming out here just to really show that they cranked it up to 11, something like that. So let's pull this back out there. And the other thing too, here with the microphone, I know, you know, with the T-Rex having super short, tiny arms, didn't wrap this all the way around, but the hand just kind of ends behind this microphone. So a couple things here, if you would have just pulled the hand out and made it a little bit more visible back here, or even, you know, wrapped it around the top of the mic like that, I think it would have looked a little bit better just than having that stop abruptly there and having nothing behind it. But an overall fantastic job. Love the piece so much. So thanks so much for sharing that this week, Cory. Next up is Nicole M, and she's got this awesome dinosaur here. The reason I wanted to show this one to you guys today is you can kind of see Nicole left the sketch lines here underneath, so you can kind of see how everything was built up from that initial kind of sketch and design stage. This is one thing I talk a lot about in the Cartooning 101 videos, is really kind of understanding the basics, building blocks, and the foundations of your drawing before you jump in. So I know a lot of people starting out, they want to, you know, look at a reference photo, and rather than, you know, drawing this building block foundation initially, what they'll do is, like I said, look at a reference photo and just kind of start drawing and doing the lines like this, and you know, just building up everything like this. And a lot of times you're not going to get the right look. It's going to look very kind of traced and stagnant and stale. So one of the key tips that I can give you guys is to definitely take Nicole's approach to this. When you start out with designs, you know, starting out just building up where everything goes. If you've watched my videos before, I keep a really loose style on the sketch stage just to kind of build up where everything goes. And then I'll go back in and, you know, kind of fine tune everything. It's really a way that you can do it and not get stuck trying to make perfect lines the first time. It's going to breathe a lot more life into your drawings if you use this approach. So that's why I wanted to show you Nicole's today, because just a fantastic job illustrating that idea. So thanks so much, Nicole, for submitting that this week. Next up is Catherine, and Catherine's got this fantastic Triceratops skull head with the flowers and the leaves coming around. And I think this one works so well just because you're taking two very different subject matters and mashing them together. Of course, with the skull, you know, it's usually kind of a metal type of thing. You see skulls a lot in, you know, heavy metal artwork or biker designs, stuff like that. And I think this works really well. A lot of times you'll see, you know, skulls with biker designs and roses, but they don't really mesh well as far as making it not look like a biker design. And I think this one is just a fantastic job combining two distinct different pieces into one. So instead of having, you know, a very kind of dark, sinister feel to a skull, you know, we've got this instead kind of almost a feminine quality to it. Everything is just a very kind of subtle, natural look, which I love. Fantastic job doing the cross hatching throughout. I love that for the shading. It's just so well. And then even the parts that don't have, you know, the overlapping cross hatches, just these extra lines here to kind of give some more texture to the skull, I think works great. And then the background color too is just fantastic. So this one I can really kind of see as a piece of tattoo flash. It really just is reminiscent of that and makes me think this one would look good as ink. So just a fantastic job, Catherine. Thanks so much for submitting that one. Next up is Warzone, and this one is, of course, from Pokemon. Dragon type, but you know, we'll let that fly for a dinosaur too. So just a really cool design, very big, very hulking. You can tell that perspective wise, you know, we've got this kind of bigger down at the bottom, goes up smaller towards the head at the top. So really have some really good perspective there going on, making him look really, really huge. One thing that I would urge you to work on definitely is with the shadows. With this, I know you've got kind of a line coming down here, but then the rest of this is just an overall just kind of swooping line that, okay, everything past here is shadowed. So I'm going to try to show you some better ways to approach this. Of course, I don't have the actual source files for these. These are just pictures that I downloaded from the Facebook page and Instagram and Twitter and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to be able to do this perfectly, but we'll try to get as close as possible here. Let's see. Maybe put this in just a little bit more. There we go. It's going to be close enough here. So like I said, we had the shadow coming down here and over here. So let me add in a new layer and we'll do some shadow work here. So I like this line coming down here. I think that's good. But instead of just having this wrap around, one thing I would really kind of suggest doing is we can kind of see where the line is here. Really look at the way that your design flows. So with this, I would have the shadow kind of come down here so it doesn't take up the whole face. Just kind of want it on this backside, but see as this curve comes around, the shadow will kind of follow that, so we can have a curve there as well that's going to kind of do the same thing. And then I'll go ahead and drop the opacity so you can start seeing what this is doing. So we've got the curve there, the curve up there, just following the line work that you've already done. Same thing here, we can follow that underneath that lip there and around the bottom of the chin. Same thing here underneath the chin, we can pull this down. And then where this is, we can kind of pull that down to connect over here. And then we can fill in, you know, the rest of this with the shadow. So we still got a pretty big shadow there across the, you know, the right-hand side and the belly, but that's going to fill in too much. But you can kind of see exactly, you know, this is going to follow those lines a little bit better, and it's not going to be as just kind of, I guess, kind of sloppy, or just using that as kind of the fail-safe way of doing shadows, just throwing something in just to have a shadow there. That's one thing, if you're not super keen on how to do shadows, so on and so forth, with that, a lot of times a design might not need shadows. I think a design just plain without shadows and highlights will look a lot better than a design with poorly placed shadows and highlights. So, you know, always, if you're doing this digital, always put them on a separate layer. And if you don't like them, you can always pull them off and see exactly, you know, how they look with or without. And then with this, of course, this would be completely shadowed, but like I've talked about a lot in my previous videos, even an area that will be completely shadowed, I really like to go in, fill it all in, and then go back in with the eraser and pull out some of the shadows along the edges, just so the viewer sees that that is shadowed. If it's completely filled in, you might not realize that it's completely shadowed like that. So just pulling this out like this, a lot of times it's not going to be totally realistic the way that the shadows would fall, but I do think it looks better just because you can see that that part is shadowed. Same thing here, you know, pulling this around like this and maybe having just the edge there non-shadowed would work. But definitely give it a go, try it out. Like I said, use the lines that you've created kind of as your go-to reference of where the curves should fall, how you kind of warp these and wrap them around, and just practice. I think you'll be surprised with the results. So thanks for submitting that one this week. Next up is Matt J. I think this was one of Matt's maybe first posts to the group, so welcome. I love the colors in this, just something that you really don't see in a lot of dinosaur designs. So these really kind of neon pastel colors I think work really well together. You got brighter, more neon here on the face, and then the background just kind of this lighter pastel using the same kind of overall color palette, but just, you know, a lighter color. I love the fact that you've got these shadows done with this purple in here. It really kind of builds up the folds in the skin, and it looks really believable and really nice. I like using that rather than going in like the previous one that I showed you, and, you know, just adding black and dropping the opacity. I think this really makes this design shine, having those purple shadows in here. The way the light here wraps around the front too is just really great, and I like having the light back here just to kind of break up that really heavy shadow. Just the folds just look incredible with that purple, and I love how it's done. The eye too has got a lot of personality to it. Love what you did with the eye there. You've got the yellow with the nice glow there, really makes that pop and stand out. So just a fantastic job. So thanks for sharing that one this week, Matt. Next up, we've got Thomas, and Thomas did a Yoshi, and I think a lot of people in the group went with Yoshi this week. This is the only Yoshi that I picked for the video, though, because I didn't want it to be a full-on Yoshi video, but it was cool seeing your guys' take on Yoshi. So this one, Tom did kind of more of a painterly style, so we'll talk about that. The one thing to look at here, if you're doing a painterly style, kind of decide what you're going to go with. There's, you know, areas here where it's, you know, perfect, no line, you know, outline here with the painterly style coming around. But then we get into parts here which have lines to them. You know, you've got outlines down here, nothing over here, outlines here and down here, but in between the shoes there's nothing. So I would say really kind of pick a style and hone in on it when you're doing a single piece like this. So if you want to switch between like a painterly style and an outline style on two different pieces just to kind of get the feel for it, say go for it. But if you're doing, you know, a single piece like this, really pick one and stick with it, because it looks a little off having these. So a couple things here that we can do to kind of fix this a little bit. Let's go ahead and go to, let's see, I'm going to use artistic, and let's use hearts. This is the eraser. I don't know if this is going to work on this or not. I think it will. So here we've kind of just got gobs of stuff around here. If we go ahead and just go in here and kind of do some eraser around, we can kind of fine tune these lines a little bit more. And then going back in with the blur tool here, we're going to use that hearts again. This, you can kind of blur this around. If you've got a light source coming in from here, since this background's white, it's actually going to leak that background and that white into the green. So you can use that as an easy way to kind of add a white color for a highlight on the edges, and then just kind of work this back and forth to blend that in, so you can get just a little bit nicer outlines here without using outlines, and it's going to be a little bit smoother. So you can play around with that. Same thing here, you know, just kind of breaking those up. I think eraser wise, there's probably a better one to use for getting these. Oops, that's huge. getting these lines down and across. That one's a little bit better. And then going back in here once again with the blur tool just to kind of clean it up a little bit and blend that in. One thing here too, if you're using a white background, definitely make sure that you leave in a separation here between, so we can't really even see where the belly comes out at here. So pulling this around and then going ahead and adding in just maybe like a gray ever so light up here. Let's go ahead and switch to a paintbrush here. Use that hearts again. And with this, we're basically just building up a gray color. We're not doing the actual line itself because we're going to blend this in. So once we start blending this back and around, you'll see that's going to break that up a little bit. We just want to get rid of that hard line. We just want that color to come out to the edge there. So we've got the gray rather than that stark white that's blending into the background. And you can kind of see how well that builds up to kind of give that belly just a little bit more definition against the background. Same thing down here, just really kind of going in with some darker colors to build up the separation between the shoes here. So we want to kind of show where those are. So just building up the colors here. You kind of started, but just getting it a little bit darker, a little bit more fine-tuned. So you've got a little bit harsher of a line there. And then we can go back and forth with pulling the red back into that gray if it gets too dark. It's one of the nice blending options with some of these paintbrush tools that are in the brush sets. So we see there, we start to build up kind of a difference between, so they don't look like they're just coming directly in together. And then the same thing around here, just getting rid of those lines and using the colors as the separator between those. It's going to make it look a lot nicer if you're going for that painterly effect rather than just going in and using those lines right there. So give that a try and see what you can do. But thanks so much for submitting that this week. I love the overall look of it and that painterly style up here. You just really captured some really good textures up there. So keep at it. Next up is Smoskoi. Hopefully I pronounced that right. This one is two different versions of the same one. T-Rex Hates Keyboard. And I love this. Very cool seeing the way that, you know, two different color schemes can kind of affect the overall design. But I love having this kind of framed rectangle here in the back. The shadows here too, really crazy, thick, heavy, dark shadows. But I think it works really well just because it almost kind of gives that ominous, dreaded, like I'm stuck in a cubicle and I hate my life feel, which I think is really cool. So it's very dark and I think it works well for the design. I just love too that it almost gives the computer desk a silhouette. Of course, you can pull in here and still see that there are lines here, but it does almost have that silhouette look to it. And I think it's just a overall fantastic job. Love that profile view too. I think it just works really well, and love the little Venus flytrap there on the desk and the jar, the planner. That's so cool. Love it. Love to down here just the weight of the T-Rex on this chair is kind of making it pop. Just little things like that draw you in, and you don't see them right at first, and the more you look at it, the more details come out. I think that's a really good design choice for something like this, and goes a long way in building interest with the viewer. So fantastic job there. Next up is Sean, and Sean's work in the group is just fantastic. I love the overall technique that he uses, and just a very like lowbrow art style. One of my favorite types of art is lowbrow. Just love some of the stuff that artists come up with, and this one is just a great example of that. Just so many lines throughout here. Just a ton of work went into detailing just these textures around and building it up, and you just got this, you know, just gross looking Triceratops, and love the eyes. It's one of the kind of lowbrow type of techniques or reoccurring themes throughout. You know, you've got the eyes everywhere, you've got the dripping, and then a lot of these lines too, just to dirty everything up. And I think it's just a fantastic piece. Definitely something out of the norm that you would see usually for dinosaurs, and that's why I loved it so much and why it really kind of sticks out. So just really cool, Sean. Thanks for submitting that, and love seeing your work every week. Next up is Nix and Nervous Rex. Love this one. Line work is just fantastic. Character design is off the charts. Same thing with the shadows and highlights. I just love these kind of hard angles you've got throughout here, and they're just placed so well, so perfect. Just love them so much. A fantastic job. Also, the background here is just super, super cool with the volcano. We've got the asteroid coming in, and the colors here too. I love the browns and the oranges and the yellows. Just a really great job. One thing here, I'm not saying that this was meant for a t-shirt design, but I don't think I've really talked about this before for t-shirts. So a lot of people are getting into merch by Amazon. They're getting into print on demand stuff because of some of the stuff I've talked about with my videos. One thing to keep in mind when you're getting into print on demand clothing and what's called DTG, which is direct to garment printing, is the technique used is basically like a giant inkjet printer, but to get it to pop on the shirt, since it's not using the regular screen print technique, is they lay down a coat of white. It's basically a white base that your design prints on top. So one thing to keep in mind, and like I said, not saying this is for a t-shirt design, but it made me think of bringing this up. One thing to keep in mind, having any level of opacity against the background does not work on DTG. So this is not going to print like you think it is. There's no way for the printer to print this opacity. So you're basically going to have just like a solid white down here, and it's going to look really, really weird. So definitely make sure not using opacity on stuff like this. You would want this to come down, you know, completely around and just have it filled in solid. So there's some other techniques that we'll talk about later, how you can kind of trick, you know, by using different brushes and techniques to get that look through using different brushes and so on and so forth. So we'll talk about that later in another video. I won't touch on it today, but just keep that in mind. Don't do opacity against a background because it won't work on print on demand DTG stuff. So back to the actual design. Like I said, just really cool. The one thing here that I probably would have changed a little bit, just because looking at it first, you've got a really large amount of green and a lot happening in this section right here with him pulling the tail around. I think that is an awesome design choice, and you really kind of understand the Nervous Rex idea of the theme. The one thing I probably would have done just to break that up a little bit is maybe throw in some just like yellow circles or something along the tail. So let me move back to my brush here. But just throwing some yellow circles here, because once you get around to the actual front, then I think it's easier to read that that's his tail going into his mouth. I think right off the bat, you don't initially see that that's what it is. And I think just adding those would break up just that massive amount of green in there. So that would be my only tip on this one, but just fantastic job. Love this one so much. So thanks so much for submitting that one this week. I really love seeing that. Next up is Rachel, and this one I had to include because Rachel was doing the dinosaur challenge and said that her son hopped in and said, "Hey mom, dinosaurs are awesome. I want to do a dinosaur and I want you to post it for me." So her son's 7, and this one is just so cool. I love artwork from kids. It's just got this kind of innocence to it that just you lose over time, and I think if we could all get back to just that, like I said, that innocence and the not caring and just going and shooting from the hip and just drawing what you want, not worrying if other people are going to like it, not worrying if, you know, if your lines here are perfect or if this perspective is perfect or if everything's just, you know, 100% where it's supposed to be. I love seeing stuff like this. And if you've got kids out there, save your kids' artwork. I've got a huge just stack, a file of artwork for my kids the years they were growing up. Just stuff I love to go back and see, and really kind of brings you back in time. And like I said, just the overall technique that the kids use is just so cool, and I love it. I love it so much. So I had to show that off this week, Rachel. So tell your son he is awesome. Show him this video. Tell him to keep drawing, keep creating. Next up is Christine, and Christine's stuff, I've showed it before on the channel, and I tell everybody with these videos, I don't always pick the best designs for the week. I don't always pick the worst designs. I just pick designs that I can really, you know, kind of talk about and show stuff and pointers and use as learning tools. So that's why Christine if I didn't do that, Christine's stuff would be in every single video every single week, because her stuff is just so amazing. Just the kind of look that she goes for, it's kind of got that scratchboard look, and it's just so unique, so just her style. This is what I'm getting at when I talk about, you know, if you can develop a style for yourself, kind of get comfortable with your artwork, comfortable with the style you go with, and when you draw something, you can post it online and without your name attached, you know, the general public that knows you can see it and say, hey, this is so-and-so's artwork. And Christine's a perfect example of that. Anytime she posts in the group, you can automatically tell it's hers, and every single one is just as good as the last. It's just an incredible piece this week, as always. So I wanted to show that off and just really kind of show you guys with this one and talk about developing your own art style, making kind of a name for yourself based around the style and techniques you use. And I think Christine's a perfect example of that. So thanks so much, Christine, for sharing that one. Last up is Shelley, and Shelley had actually posted this one before when she joined the group, and then realized that, you know, this week's was dinosaur prompt, so she went ahead and posted this again, which is totally cool because this one is just a fantastic piece. So watercolor traditional piece. Once again, if you guys join the group, if you want to take part in any of these weekly prompts and challenges, it doesn't matter if it's digital, if it's traditional. Everything's free game as long as it's art, it's something you created. So I know a lot of people are kind of scared off when they see me using an iPad and they see a lot of digital work in the group, but that's not the case. You can use watercolors, you know, paper, pens, pencils, markers, it doesn't matter. And I think this one is just super cool. Once again, kind of back to Catherine's with kind of combining two different things. So usually with dinosaurs, you know, very kind of scary giant lizards, and a lot of people go for, you know, the scare factor with them and just how hulking and big they are. And I think this one is great, just like Catherine's, kind of combining two separate different ideas into one and then meshing them so well. So we've got something, like I said, that's usually kind of horrific sometimes if you think Jurassic Park and them you know, being chased through the forest with the T-Rex. And with this one, everything is kind of more feminine. It's lightened up with this floral pattern, and the crown of the flowers here and the bouquet of flowers, I think, is really well done. I love to just the building up the textures throughout with the watercolors, how it really has that kind of scaly feeling. There's a lot of kind of dimension and texture throughout here that you can kind of see those scales around the head, and the shadows and highlights are kind of built up with the varying values of the watercolor palette that you use. So just an overall fantastic job. Can't wait to see more of your artwork, because I love seeing traditional stuff like this, and what you can do with watercolors just blows me away. So great job. And that is it for this week's prompt, Dinosaur. Alright guys, that's it for this week's video. As always, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. If you like today's video too, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the bell for notifications so you can get alerted when I post new videos. And last week's word was dinosaur, so this week, get ready to channel your inner Mr. Miyagi, because this week's word is bonsai tree. So let's see what you guys can do. Once you're done with your design, if you're new to the channel, basically, hop on over to Facebook. I created an art group over there called Keep Creating, a Learn, Draw, Share art community, which I will link in the description below. That's where you post your art. If you don't have Facebook, you can tag me on Instagram or Twitter at BJDell, or you can also head over to my website, bjdell.com. There's a contact form over there where you can email them to me as well. So that's where you can find me online. I want to see what you guys can do. You've got from today, which is Wednesday, till the following Tuesday to submit these designs, and then I do the following video next Wednesday. So let's see what you guys can do. That's it for me, and until next time, keep creating.